All right, let's get right into it. Today we're breaking down India's ambitious new 2035 climate plan. Think of this as a high-level strategic briefing. We're zeroing in on the main commitments and, crucially, what needs to happen for them to actually succeed.
So here's how we'll tackle this. First, we'll look at the new commitments themselves. Then, we'll dive into their track record, which is pretty impressive. After that, we'll unpack their official stance on global responsibility. And finally, we'll get to the really critical part, the path to making it all happen.
Okay, first things first, let's get to the core of the plan. This is what's known as India's Third Nationally Determined Contribution, or NDC for short. It's basically their climate action roadmap for the next decade, right up to 2035.
So the first big number to know is this, 47%. That's the target for cutting the emissions intensity of their GDP from 2005 levels. What does that really mean? Well, it's all about decoupling economic growth from emissions. You want the economy to grow, but you don't want emissions to grow with it. That's a huge strategic goal right there.
Next up, a massive, and I mean massive, push in the energy sector. The goal is to get around 60% of their total installed electric power from non-fossil fuel sources. We're talking about a fundamental transformation of the country's entire energy grid.
And the third key piece? It's a major nature-based solution. The plan calls for creating a huge additional carbon sink. We're talking up to 4 billion tons of CO2 equivalent. How? By expanding forests and tree cover. This isn't just about reducing emissions, it's about actively pulling carbon right out of the atmosphere. Now, I know what you might be thinking. These are some seriously ambitious targets. But here's the thing, they're built on a solid record of past performance, and understanding that context is absolutely key to seeing why these new goals have real weight on the global stage.
This is where it gets really interesting. Just look at this track record. They had a 2030 target for non-fossil fuel power, right? They hit it 9 years early, back in 2021. And that emissions intensity target, they smashed that a full 11 years ahead of schedule. This history of not just meeting but beating their goals is exactly why their new commitments are taken so seriously.
So, with that track record in their back pocket, it gives them the foundation for their official position, which is essentially a call for developed nations to step up their own game.
And they don't mince words. In their official submission to the UN, they make their perspective crystal clear. They point out their minimal historical role in causing the climate problem in the first place, and then they say, pretty directly, that the response from developed countries just hasn't been good enough.
And this really sums up their whole diplomatic stance. They've even coined a term for it, the mitigation ambition gap. It's a clever way to frame the shortfall in global climate action, putting the spotlight right on what they see as the failure of developed nations to live up to their promises.
Okay, this brings us to what might be the single most important strategic point of this entire plan. These targets, they're not set in stone. They are conditional. So let's dig into exactly what India says it needs to make all this a reality.
And the document is incredibly direct about this. The whole plan, the whole thing, hinges on getting support from developed countries in 3 specific areas. We're talking serious financial resources, access to cutting-edge technology, and help with capacity building.
I mean, look at this quote right from the document. It couldn't be more explicit. That huge 60% non-fossil fuel target, one of their biggest commitments, is directly and publicly tied to getting technology and low-cost financing. This isn't buried in the fine print. It's a core, non-negotiable condition.
And so that leaves us with the big central strategic question, doesn't it? India has put a credible, ambitious plan on the table, and they've backed it up with a proven track record. The ball is now squarely in the court of the international community. So, will developed nations step up and provide the support that's being asked for? The answer to that question is pretty much going to define the next decade of global climate action. A lot is riding on this.